Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the Notion in Practice podcast.
This is the podcast where you'll hear how real people build and scale their workflows in Notion.
Last week we spent a bunch of time talking about Notion AI, and I told you a whole heap about my story and my journey to this point. This week we're going to focus on AI again, but we're going to take it a step further and talk about AI Playbooks that we're building in Notion. But I wanted to start today giving you a chance to get to know Jerwin and hear some of his story.
So hi, I'm Jerwin. For those of you who don't know me, I am a Notion ambassador here in Sydney, one of the founding ambassadors, and I have the pleasure of leading a cybersecurity firm called Trust on Cloud, which we're a fully remote company who help organizations onboard cloud services with confidence. And so my day-to-day is essentially running the marketing campaign strategy and melding our information from marketing, sales, and product all together in one centralized place. My background is I spent a lot of time across large tech companies. I did a bit of consulting at uni, event management, marketing management, sales. And so I've worked across large organizations and now at a scaling startup. And yeah, I've essentially used Notion as my second brain to help me achieve lots of different things across the wheel of life.
Do you remember when did you first bump into Notion?
Yes. So it would be back in the pinnacle ages of Notion just releasing. And I think they just created the database feature where I found them.
Okay.
I think it was on Twitter. And I saw a screenshot
Yep.
and someone demoing it. I was like, oh, this is so cool. At the time, I was a big OneNote nerd. A little bit of bias because I was a product advisor at Microsoft at the time. And I essentially was studying my honors in entrepreneurship at UTS. And you could imagine my OneNote files were so super organized. Like I spent hours and hours on different color coding all the different OneNote pages, having all of the different lecture slides, lecture notes, reports, reporting, marks, all in different places. And I realized a chunk of that year, of my honors year, was just organizing it to the point where I can try to find it quicker, make it look pretty. So like when I'm presenting my thesis to my advisor, Julian, he'd be able to make sense of what I was doing. I was reflecting well as I was writing the right things. And then so I found Notion, and then I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Like, first of all, it's all online. And so at that time, I was starting to migrate a lot of my personal files, my study notes onto OneDrive and Google Cloud. And I remember how many times I lost my Microsoft Word documents. And I didn't really like using Google Docs because it wasn't really my preference.
You're
for
a
when I was
Microsoft
starting.
man.
Yeah. Well, I was a Microsoft man. And so I just started onboarding it slowly into Notion. I was like, okay, I've got to write this report. And so let me start copy and pasting and putting into this database. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like I really love the aesthetic of it all. And so over time, it just started first with my honors report that I was writing. And then eventually the business I made with my honors was started to onboard onto there. I was like, I created my first company hub, I called it. And so I was sort of like, this is our value proposition. This is our customers. And I had like a Notion page with an emoji before each. So I was like, this is so cool. And so like, I remember showing some of my classmates at the time. And I was like, look at this. This whole page, click through here, back, bang. So efficient, right? They were like, they weren't impressed at the time because one, the UI wasn't as good as it is now.
Yeah.
But I saw it. I was like, oh, this is so cool. It saved me so much time and the clunkiness. Yeah. Love at first sight. And then so that I did that. And then over time, I just onboarded other things like my personal stuff. I was like, okay, I was practicing Bujo at the time. And so I didn't get rid of Bujo, which is bullet journaling. But what I did do was offload a lot of the information I wanted to retain onto Notion. So like, what are my main book learnings? And so I started a book learning database. So if I could quickly go back and say, what are the 3 key themes from Atomic Habits? I wouldn't have to go on my physical book. I have to find it and be like, okay, these are the things, I could easily just search it up on Notion through these
Yeah.
databases. Yeah. So it started like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it also moved to other things, to tracking some of the customers I had at the time with my first startup called Spot Me, which sort of tried to implement a little bit of AI into the fitness routines and stuff like that. And so
Oh, yeah.
it got really clunky, actually. And so the governance piece, I remember, actually, I had one person I gave the wrong database to for his fitness routine. And he was like, I can see all this guy's like before photos, his logs. And I was like, oh no, I haven't made that
Oops.
mistake since.
So was there a time like when it really kind of clicked, or did it just evolve? Because it sounds like, you started doing it in one area and then it just sort of slowly moved out to take over your whole world.
Yeah, I'd say it clicked. I don't know the exact moment it clicked, probably when I was at UTS, but it clicked when I realized that, hey, I was now using Notion for my study notes or my workshop notes for all my honors work. And then now I'm starting to put all my book learnings and readings into this place. I can put my other stuff, like my client portfolio work, my resume, centralize a database for each aspect of my life. And I was like, that's when I had to click. I was like, stop becoming another app where I had so many different productivity apps for everything, to track
Yeah.
everything. I had a Word document for this. I had a OneNote for all my uni studies. I had my Apple Notes for my fitness progression. And then I just started to
Yeah.
chuck it into Notion. That's probably where it
All in
clicked,
the one place.
where I could just
Yeah. Right.
click one place and then I could access everything. I was like, this is
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
efficient and it's so cool, because then I started to get into the other side that was popping off into Notion, which was like making all your databases look beautiful and pretty and having a landing
Yeah.
page and all that stuff. I was like, oh, spent so much time on that.
Yeah. So good. So good. And so, I mean, that's what, 6, 7 years of time really that you've
Yeah.
been using it. Is there sort of one thing you've built that you're sort of especially proud of because it's changed the way like you or a team you're working with sort of operated?
At the moment, it's essentially the spine of everything that I do. I feel like it augments my way of thinking now. So I can sort of be in a meeting or be in a conversation where I'm always asking myself by principle, what are my current goals this year, and am I tracking towards them? And so the thing that I built was, I wouldn't say it would be the specific database, but it would be the philosophy I built with Notion, which is the notion of reflection. And so I think nowadays we all get so busy with our time, and we achieve one thing, but we don't have time to reflect on them. Well, I feel. And so I built this database that adds on to the concepts discussed in Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. It's a fantastic book. I recommend everyone read that. And so I actually was writing a piece about this. What are your anti-New Year's resolutions that you were going to have this year, and how do you track it through Notion? And so for me is I have one centralized database that goes through the wheel of life and across finance, work, family, friends, health, happiness. I'll give you guys a link to the wheel of life article I made, or concept. I think it looks pretty cool. And so I reflect on that database based on what I did this year. And I was like, did I achieve what I wanted to do? No, I didn't. So what went wrong, and what can I do going next year? Or is this sort of the goal I still want to have next year? And so I do that through that Notion database. And then I ask myself those raw questions. It's sort of like, if I would continue doing this for the next 5 years, will I achieve some of my bucket list life goals? And so that database has been integral for me this year. It's sort of every week I sit down on Sunday, I go back on that specific database, which I'd love to share with you guys, but has a little bit of PII in it. Maybe I'll create a dummy version for and then I'll share it. But without that database, I wouldn't be where I am today this year, because it helped me make big decisions quickly. And so one of my goals within that database, say the finance part of the wheel of life, which is to save X amount of dollars, let's say like 6 to 12 month emergency fund. I say that. But then all of a sudden there was an opportunity for me to travel this year and I was like, I really want to become a digital nomad this year. And so it started when I was in the Philippines. I was there with my dad for his 50th. And there was an opportunity where I was talking to someone in this island called Panglao, or Bohol, where I was at. And there were a lot of Koreans there. And they were like, I was like, why is there so many Koreans here? And I made a Korean friend. He's like, there's a direct flight here now from Korea and it's only 100 USD. I was like, huh? One way? It's like, yeah. And so I booked it. And then so I had to shift my whole yearly strategy from the finance perspective. And I changed that to saving 6 to 12 months to
Spending 6 to 12 months in
saving or staying afloat for 6 months as I travel across all these bucket list items that I have to travel, which is also another Notion database. And I started to pick and choose where I wanted to go. And then I had my Notion AI agent and I was like, hey, is this viable for me? Because I have some of my finance data. That's why I want that locking feature for that finance thing, which I've requested for Notion. Please allow me to password protect some databases because, hey, I got some of my finance on here. But yeah, I'd say that it's my yearly goals database, which is a mega database. And within those has separate databases that I visit each week and track how I'm progressing. So if I want to read 52 books this year, which I wanted to do, and I didn't end up doing, I only did 26 because I started learning Spanish. I put a red mark on that and I replaced it with a different database, which is Learn Espanol. And then that's where the goals under that came into play.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, nice. Well, I mean, I'm interested in how Notion AI has changed things like that because certainly in my journey, I was a heavy Notion user using it for all kinds of things. And then AI has come along and integrated with that in a pretty amazing way. Like, what does that look like for you? How has Notion AI changed up what you've already been doing?
There's an easy use case I could say straight away. I wouldn't have been able to survive traveling 6 months this year to Europe, to Korea, to Philippines. I'd say Europe in particular because I didn't do any research on Europe before I went there. I sort of was like, I know I'm spawning is a gaming term. I know I'm starting my journey in Madrid. I know I eventually have to end up in London for Fashion Week. The point is, how I managed all that was through a Notion AI agent I built. I was like, hey, you have access to my bucket list items. You have access to my Wheel of Life database, which tracks all my goals. And then I went through sort of specifics. Maybe I can share what I did for it, but I essentially created a travel agent for me that was raw, was honest, had access to my finances and said, I'm going to spend X amount of days here in Madrid, X amount of days here in Barcelona, X amount of days here in Paris. Hey, do we go to Belgium? Oh, hey, after London, cousin's flying back to Sydney. I want to stay here for another month or two. Recommend me a route to go right Europe or bottom Europe. And so I would just have conversations with my AI travel agent. It saved me so much time. And so when I was talking to people, it was like, what are you doing here in Belgium? I was like, oh, what are you going to get it up to? And it's like, oh, let me pull this up. So the top 3 things based on what I love to do, which I want to try, is all the Belgium sweets. So I'm going to this, and this shop. And funnily enough, it took me to all of the amazing spots in Belgium. I didn't have to go on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No guidebooks, huh?
No guidebooks. It was my guidebook, actually.
Yeah. That's right. It's fundamentally changed. If you choose to, I was having a good chat to someone about this yesterday. You need to break into the perspective that says, hey, I can use this tool, for those sorts of things. And it's very like conversational, right? You just got to sort of start chatting with it. And then that opens up the potential for these things. But that's very cool.
It was also that one. And then there's another one, which was my Notion AI work agent to help me adjust to time zone differences, let me know what time it is in Sydney and New Zealand and other countries and how to integrate my work so that it doesn't impact me while I'm traveling as well. That was another thing. And so from a work perspective, it's just been also insane. I just took the philosophies that I did when I built my travel agent and I did a work one as well, which I don't even know how to explain it. It's sort of, it has access to all your information that you want it to have access to. It has access, it can make it speak in a way you want it to speak. And then it helps me understand and make decisions with confidence. How's that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's really cool. It's really cool. And so I'm interested in, like, those were really good examples of how you personally have used it to like research and understand and I guess, help you practically do things. Have you built any workflows? I've been calling them playbooks in my world, that where you set the agent off
Mm-hmm.
to do something that you used to have to do.
Just so I'm understanding, when you say playbook, what do you actually mean by that? Because do you mean it's a
Yeah.
playbook that the AI agent looks and can only see as their sort of brain?
Yeah.
Or is it
Yeah.
a playbook in terms of orchestrating the entire process of that playbook?
Let me show you. So these are my personalized instructions, right? So at the moment you have like Nosy over here, and they can have their own personalized instructions.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when Notion launched this feature, there was a lot of talk about, well, you switch, you say, oh, I'm going to use a different guy now. And you switch the instructions,
Yeah.
and you change them. But actually, what I found quite quickly is switching between agents, personalized agents, is a clunky process
It is.
because there's a whole bunch of things about how Al, my guy here, works that I want to be consistent across all agents.
Yes.
Like I want him to understand his instructions in a certain way, or I want him to pull context from a particular place. Doesn't matter which version of himself he's being. So I sort of developed this idea of a playbook. So I've got personalized instructions. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here that we could explore at some point that has been really useful, and it maps the data structure of my Notion world.
Yeah.
But you quickly get to this section that's playbooks, and each of these is a specific workflow that I want to call on an agent for, and I want him to take on a certain personality and instructions at that point about how he should behave. And so some of them are very just like, here's the process, follow it exactly, don't do anything else, just do this thing. And so what I've done is I've set it up so that it just uses natural language to match these, and it prioritizes it. So
Very
it's
cool.
looking for the playbook first. So I will come out of a call, and I would have done this for our podcast kind of calls.
Mm-hmm.
I'll come out of the meeting and I'll be in the meeting transcript and I'll say, follow up this meeting. And so it goes and pulls this. And when it does that, it then runs this set of instructions. And so you can see it's like it pulls the meeting, it looks at the transcript, prioritizes that, but it also looks back at the project that it's connected to, and it goes looking for a proposal, because a lot of my meetings are connected to a client that's got a proposal. And so it understands the broader context, and then it does things for me. So it creates actions, it assigns owners to those and uses this sort of chain of reasoning prompt to do that. It drafts a follow-up email. So I'm testing the Notion Mail AI connector. And so it literally creates the draft inside my mail client, which is very cool.
I didn't know it can do that.
Creates an engagement entry in my client engagements thing. And then it updates the project. Like I've just got a bunch of statuses at the project level that it writes a summary of it for in there. And so that workflow, I just call it a playbook because I had to make up a name for these things. But I just say, do the meeting follow-up, and then I go and make a coffee and come back and it's done. Yeah. And so this concept of playbooks, like you could I just keep making more. Some of them are really simple. One of them is like add stuff to my shopping list, because one of the kids will yell out, hey, we need shampoo. And I'll just say to the AI, like, can you add shampoo to the list? And then it follows the shopping list playbook, which is relatively complicated because it goes and looks at a list and sees if it's there, and then identifies what it is and ticks it or not. But I only have to do that once. And then now I just always have that playbook to kind of call on. And so you can see there's a heap of these. They write proposals, it qualifies leads, it does all kinds of stuff.
So in terms of this playbook, what was the first playbook you made? And how did you come to the process of, like, how do you structure it in a way? Because I know even me just watching this, I have a couple of my own, I call them council members that sort of operate within specific rules and boundaries for each task of my life. Whether it's work, it operates and thinks in a different way. Whereas if it's something more like, drafting an email to a couple of mates to hang out and track, let's plan a trip that makes it out of the group chat. It speaks differently. Not to say that it's replaced my whole comms, but it just captures everything in a way that I want it to, so I can read it better. But for me, if I'm looking at this and I want to do this at work from a work context, my organization's like, wow, we need this. Where I'm a busy product manager, or busy marketer. But I don't know where to start. Like, what are the rules of your playbook that you sort of would recommend for someone starting from scratch?
Yeah, sure. Well, this is actually the first one that I made.
Client catch up.
Which we could talk about at another point, but I wanted something that would like trigger my memory about where a job was up to, a project was up to, because, you sort of get go down a rabbit hole on a few other things, and then you come back to something a couple of days later or a week later, and you think, shit, I don't remember where I was up to.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't remember what happened.
Like, what was the last thing that we need to do?
Exactly. Yeah. And what I found is early, I was saying to the AI, oh, hey, I need you to tell me everything about this client. And it was just a barrage of information. It was so unhelpful.
Yeah.
And so then I ended up sort of tweaking this so that I said, oh, your job is to just trigger my memory. Just like give me enough tidbits that my brain will go, oh, yeah, I remember what it was. And so it literally says things like, oh, the last call you and Jerwin had, he was worried about this. You know, the overall kind of goal for this project is this. It'll pull like little snippets out of a proposal. And then I'll be, oh, yeah, I'm back, you know. Anyway, yeah. So one of the things I have done is make some instructions about how to build a playbook. Well, the AI did it, but it was my idea. So they have sort of, I guess there are some rules about or guidelines about when it makes sense to use one and when it doesn't. It's worth investing in it if it's a consistent, repeatable process.
Oh, right.
If it's just a random one-off, then just chat.
Just because it needs to be integrated into the ways of your working, right? A habit needs to be formed. It needs to fit into your work processes, right? So
yeah, that's right. So if you do it differently every time, well, then setting up a playbook probably doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But if it is a similar flow, and then there's some instructions here about sort of like the anatomy of what one should look like, and so it literally goes through. There's
good example,
a kind
bad
of
example,
scoping. Triggers about like how it gets called. Then it needs inputs. So like, where am I getting my context from? Yeah. Where does it do its work? Like, so where's the information coming in? Where's it going out? And then what are the steps, which is really the sort of critical piece is like step by step, tell me exactly what to do. And of course we know that the less instructions you give the AI, the more it's going to have to guess. Like if you don't explain this step, that step, the next one, then it will have to guess. And sometimes it's good at guessing, but that's where a lot of the hallucinating comes from and the mistakes come from, is that we just haven't been clear enough about the boundaries. Yeah, some rules about like what the outputs should look like. These approval gates are really useful. It took me a little while to kind of work these out, but like helping the AI go, this bit is not clear enough. Can you clarify this for me before I can continue? And then, some examples. And some things that it should never do, which is very useful. Some hard rules like you are not allowed to do this. Yeah. So
there's a guardrails.
We made this kind of how to build a playbook. This is useful for humans to read, to understand, but it's much more useful for humans to give to their AI to say, this is how this concept works. Like I sort of wrote these thinking about both people and AI. Because when someone picks this up for the first time, like as a concept, both them or the AI that instance that's in their workspace doesn't know what this idea is. And then there's a template. So you basically hand that, like what I was trying to do was give people something that they could hand to the AI and say, this is how we build a playbook. And then here's a template for you to work with that's kind of based on that same model. And then all you have to do is talk to the AI and say, okay, I do this process. It should look something like this. Draft me the first version of the playbook. And then it just spins one of these up. Then you just try them out. You know, you say, do the meeting follow up after a meeting, and then you watch what happens. And then it makes some mistakes or puts something in the wrong spot. And so then you say, okay, that was pretty good, but like this is in the wrong spot. Can we change the instructions? And so then the AI rewrites its instructions slightly, and then you try it again. And, 3 or 4 times through, it works. It's great.
3 or 4 times through. So are you saying that if I were to implement this meeting follow up post my next meeting, I should expect to hack it down 3 to 4 times before I won't ever have to touch it, or not touch it again, but if I was, to pick this up from scratch, would I expect to do that 3 times?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who's been playing with AI for a while has learnt that it's not an exact science.
Yeah.
There's a lot of this, that is it's like, it's this awkward mix of you can see the potential. And on the one hand, you're like, this is amazing. Like, this is so fantastic. But then on the other hand, you're continually frustrated by the fact that it's almost there, but not quite.
Yeah. And you sort of need to always be there to be like, no, you're missing this context, or no.
Yeah. I heard someone describing it the other day as like, you're not old enough for this. But when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, there was dial-up internet. And everyone wasn't having that amazing experience of what the web could be because it was based on dial-up. And that's the period of AI that we're in at the moment. You can see the potential of like, hey, when this bit smooths out, it's going to be
awesome.
completely transformative. But in the meantime, we're still on dial-up, and so there's bits of it that suck. Yeah. So, but my experience with this, I haven't changed the meeting follow-up playbook in a long time, and I use it every day. I use it 3 or 4 times a day, probably.
Cool. I was going to ask the next question was like, how often do you go back and provide some governance or some cleanup per se of your playbooks?
Yeah. Well, they've sort of grown. They probably should be in a database at this point. I was thinking about it the other day. Because there's not much structure around them. They just literally sit on this page here, which is sort of fine for me as an individual. But when I'm rolling this out with teams, we're building a database of playbooks that give us some guidance about, like what status they're in. Are they built yet? Are they trustable, etc.?
I think the next thing with that, if you chuck it into a database, and if there's teams that don't want other teams to access certain playbooks, wouldn't it be better just to keep it separate, because then they can easily access?
I think we use row-based permissions. These days.
Yeah.
Because I think, well, what we need is a way to share this information. So we'll think about like a company. This is critical internal knowledge,
exactly,
IP, really. And so, it might be that some teams don't want other teams to use their stuff, but usually my experience, even with some of the bigger companies we're working with, is people are really like open internally. They really want to share from one team to another. They want them to understand. So they probably wouldn't want them to have edit access to their team's custom playbooks, but they might want them to see them so that they can, because it's essentially looking at someone's SOP, right? You're like, how does the marketing team go through that process and come up with this thing?
Then you can
you could go and look at the playbook. Yeah. Or even better, if you could talk to your AI and say, can you make sense of how that playbook goes and give me like the 5-point summary of what happens? And it can.
Oh, you just gave me a light bulb moment. It's sort of like when I was at a big tech company, I won't name the name, but when I was in the marketing team, I would have to brief product, sales, some of the technical software architects on a campaign that we were running. And so they would always ask, hey, what's the marketing framing here? Who are we going after? What are we doing? Is this right? Is this on brand? And now I'm just thinking, man, if I had that, it would have saved me so many hours not having to, one, jump on a meeting and go through the PowerPoint deck, or two, like not have to set up an internal intranet of like, here's what you do, here's what you won't do. Because the intranet that we created, or the SharePoint, I'd say, it was like a large document of so many different pages to keep it clean, keep it tidy. And then also so many questions. Hey, it says this here, but then am I allowed to say this here?
Yeah.
You know, and then so they're having a playbook like that where they could just ask questions. Is this right according to the marketing playbook? And then you can also see discrepancies between messaging, between sales and marketing or product or whatnot. So many, again, different use cases. But that's already something I was saw as helpful as a marketer, or even as for a sales team, or a technical person that doesn't really have the time to switch his other hat off of being like, this is the pitch for this event.
Yeah, totally. One of the things I think that we probably haven't realized in a practical sense yet, but is so close, is if you have all of your, let's say you've got company context sitting in your Notion workspace, and you've got a question about, is the sales and marketing aligned on this? With the AI having access to like across that information, as a management, you could create a prompt or a series of prompt or a, in the future, like a custom agent that runs periodically that goes and like interrogates the playbooks of both the sales team and the marketing team, and comes back to you to say, there's misalignment here.
Yes.
There's a risk here because sales are saying this and marketing is saying this, in ways that would have been so hard to do before. Like you would have to literally go and read all those things and then understand them properly and, and then be able to compare them. And the truth is that unless it was a big enough risk, people wouldn't bother doing it.
Of course, yeah.
But now you could say, hey, as a company, we really care about this. It never gets to the top of the list, but let's build an AI workflow that will do it for us. And if you're not using Notion AI and you've got all your context in a bunch of different spots, that would be a pain in the butt. But inside Notion AI, if it understands the data structure, and you could just do it, right?
I'll even add to the sales and marketing conversation is now with like these AI agents, a good playbook would be to have is to make sure those teams have the data to what the customers or prospects are saying. Right. And now you
Okay.
have this point or intersection. I think the only main thing would be the governance behind the data that, obviously what customers are saying but aligning that to marketing and sales is like, where are is what we're trying to solve working to the customer? Is a customer responding well to these messaging, or even for data analysis and coming in and making sense of the data? AI can never replace the human intuition of making sense of data. Or maybe it will get to that point one day, but what I see is sort of, look through things. You'll save so much time connecting all these sources of information and keep it to the section of the playbook where marketing, sales, and leadership or the stakeholders come onto this document and just brainstorm, right? And say, hey, this is what the AI agent's saying. Let's check what that's happening. Oh, wait, we wouldn't have seen that the customer said this.
I think that's right. Yeah. It's going to become a key part of the conversation. Like the AI is going to just need to be in the room, right? So that when leadership are discussing this thing, they can use it as a reference to say, I mean, that's what I found myself doing. I'll come out of a meeting and I'll literally say, what did you think about that call? Because I built this AI now that has so much context about me and how I work and what I've been doing.
Yes.
That it's useful.
Yeah.
It says, oh, that was a little bit like this other job. I'd be worried about this thing. Do you remember that time that we said, well, yes, we could do that, and then you spent 100 hours trying to fix something that you didn't know how to do?
Yeah.
Like it gets all of that, and it's like a person in the team. So the other thing that just I think is worth highlighting that you raised is the structure of the information behind the AI. So everybody would love, to just spin up the playbooks that they need today. But the reality of using them is that they need to have very clear descriptions of this piece of information lives in this place.
Correct, yeah.
The only way my meeting follow-up playbook works is, one, there's this like the meeting database, which is fine, but those meeting database items, they're related to a project, and that project is related to a person,
Yes.
and that person has an email address. And so when I say draft the email, it needs to know, well, who's it to? But because of the data structure, it can go and find that. Or when I say, I want every meeting follow-up to be aware of the proposal that I have, that the client signed off on, I don't want to name the proposal every time. So the meeting looks up to the project, which looks across to the resources database, which then goes and finds the proposal and the one that's signed off. And then it looks at that, and then it can be useful in the meeting. So the structure of the information, it has to be really thought through. You can't just have random shit everywhere and hope that it works.
Otherwise you'd have like different outputs. Each time it generates is just like all over the place.
Yeah, because it's got to guess, right? And so it's like our job is to create the structured, safe place for it to work its magic within, we're the managers of this thing more and more. Awesome. And so unfortunately for a lot of people, their workspaces are not organized like that. And so it's very hard for them to point the agent at the right thing.
That's why I love this idea of the playbook, right? Because it forces you to stick to the most important bits of information where it eliminates the guesswork from AI.
Yeah. One thing I think is kind of funny about what's happened with AI is like writing SOPs or structuring, being super organized like that. It was always like a really boring, like process. Not that fun thing to do. Everyone would have paid lip service to yes, you should do that. But like for the most part, no one did it unless you really had to, or unless you were sort of scaling to this certain point, and then you'd bring people in to do it for you.
Yeah.
But now it's essential. You can't use a lot of these tools effectively without it.
Yeah.
So the world has changed. Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode. It was great to be able to tell some of Jerwin's story and how he's gone from being a OneNote nerd all the way through to a Notion power user. It's a good transition, mate. Nice work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think you're going to give people a copy of that Wheel of Life reflection system. Is that right?
Correct. I'll put it in the show notes. It's basically the Wheel of Life system. I encourage you to spend 10 minutes of your day, just filling it in. You might be doing New Year's resolutions right now. And so, yeah, rank it. I'll give you a little prompt and guidance. And maybe I'll use actually your playbook, Tim, to just fix that process up a little bit. And back to you, Tim, you were going to share a playbook?
Yeah, so, well, that playbook concept that we talked about, I've built a set of instructions that is good for humans to read, but is especially good to point the AI at to say, this is what a playbook is, because it's just a made up concept. And then there's also a template for a playbook. So you kind of use those two things in tandem. And really you say to the AI, here's what a playbook is, like here's the instructions, here's a template for you to use. And then you just tell it what you want it to build, like ramble at it for a little while and get it to sort of understand what you mean. And then you set it off to build a playbook. So all that stuff will be in the show notes. Next week, we are going to have our first set of guests. So that's going to be exciting. I look forward to having you join us then. And maybe this week, try out a playbook, see if you can get the Wheel of Life template working for you. And we'll catch you next week.
You guys, see you in the next episode.